Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming and joining us today. I'm going to call this March meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Institutions of Higher Learning to order. And trustees and IEOs, if you help remind me, because I forget, to turn on our microphone, because there are people that participate remotely, and it also helps us be heard throughout this process. Trustee Cummings, if you would please provide the invitation today.
Yes, good morning. Good morning. I am so happy. Bryce Rader, the son of Trustee Rader. He's the pastor of discipleship at Christ Fellowship in Williamsburg, Virginia. He was born and raised in Columbus, went to school, completed a degree at Mississippi State University, a degree in bachelor's administration. It always does my heart good to hear him pray. So I was thrilled when he said yes, that he would agree to do that today. So the next voice you hear will be that of Pastor Bryce Rader. Thank you.
Getting doctorate at Southern Baptist Theological.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank God.
Amen. Well, I just want to start by saying I'm so thankful for the work that y'all are doing, and I'm very honored to open up this meeting in prayer. So let's go before the Lord now. Father in heaven, we come before you by our great mediator, Jesus Christ, through your Spirit, confessing our great need for you. God, we need you to be our light so we can see, our wisdom so we can act, our shepherd so we can be protected, our fortress so we can take refuge, our rock so we can be secure, our righteousness so we can stand, and our Savior so we can be reconciled to you. It's abundantly clear that we are so dependent on you, more than we could ever know or understand. So we take a few moments before this meeting begins to confess our utter need of you. God, these men and women, they need you. They need your perfect wisdom and grace to exercise authority that's in accordance with your character. And the amazing reality is you're more than willing to help. And in every situation, you're able to meet their needs. So let them trust you in everything they do. In Christ's name, amen.
Thank you very much, Pastor Rader. We
Bryce.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
The SGA presidents are not here today. They're meeting on the Delta State University campus, and I'm sure even though Dr. Ennis isn't there, that they're being treated well. So it's good, I think, that they can go to our different campuses and have different experiences and opportunity to visit with one another in a local setting. We're certainly grateful and appreciative of the leadership that they provide on their campuses. So last month, I started with Trustee Griffith, and we talked about the degrees that we obtained as an undergraduate. And so I'm going to start with Dr. Cook and let y'all tell us where you went to undergraduate school and what your undergraduate degree is. And part of this is because there's this thinking now that degrees only have value if they're in certain tech fields. And my guess is we're not all educated that way.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman of the trustees and audience here. Tracy Cook, 94 graduate, Alcorn State University in the undergrad of agriculture economics.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Dan Ennis. I'm a proud 1992 graduate of the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina, where I majored in English.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I am Denise Gregory, and I have the pleasure to say I'm a proud graduate of Jackson State University with a degree in chemistry.
Good morning, Mark Keenum. I'm a very proud graduate of Mississippi State University with an undergraduate degree in agricultural economics.
I'm Scott Tollis, and I'm the provost at the W, and I'm a 2001 graduate of Mississippi State University with a degree in management information systems.
Good morning. I'm Augusta Wallace. I serve as the chief of staff. I graduated in 2005 from Mississippi Valley State University with a business administration degree.
Good morning. I'm Glenn Boyce, and at this end of the table, Joe Paul and I have decided not to give our year. But I'm a proud graduate of Ole Miss in education. So, Joe Paul.
Okay, I'm Joe Paul, a 1975 graduate of the University of Southern Mississippi. I was a child prodigy. majoring in communication with a minor in political science.
Well, thank y'all very much for letting me put you on the spot and share a little personal information with all of us. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the February 19th minutes? If so, if there's a motion to approve those minutes? It's been a motion to approve. Is there a second? And a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? The motion passes. We now have an opportunity to continue presentations we've been having in the past from our campuses. So I'm going to invite Dr. Woodward to come to the podium and share some valuable insight into the University of Mississippi Medical Center and its mission.
Thank you very much. I am delighted to be here this morning and to tell you a little bit about the University of Mississippi Medical Center. I want to particularly call attention to this phrase here, all for your health. That is the driving force behind everything we do. We are thinking about the health of Mississippians, the health of all of us in this room, and our families. That is the North Star that we are working toward in everything we do. This is just a minute on the history. Now, at your desk for the presidents and the chancellor and the trustees, you will find a little bit more of the backstory, but this is just a sketch of the history of the medical center. You know, the young people would say how it started and how it's going. So here we are. The medical center started in 1903 on the Oxford campus as a 2-year med school. The students would go there for 2 years and then they'd go somewhere else to finish their training, typically Memphis, New Orleans, but somewhere out of state. In 1949 and 1950, a couple of the legislators started talking about, we really need a 4-year med school in Mississippi. We need a 4-year med school. We need to retain our graduates. So there was a move afoot to establish a 4-year med school, to move it to Jackson and build a teaching hospital. Not everybody thought this was a good idea. In 1950, Blaine Eaton, who is described by Governor William Winter as a country boy from Taylorsville. I looked up Taylorsville this morning. The population is a little over 1,100. It's right outside of McGee. A country boy from Taylorsville was putting forward a bill to do just that. Establish a 4-year school, move it to Jackson, build a teaching hospital. At the committee level in the House, the bill was predicted to be tied. If it ties, it dies, right? A female legislator in this second picture, a female legislator from the Mississippi Delta in the 50s from Greenville, Mississippi, Zelma Price, had been injured in a car wreck. This is a picture of her being wheeled to the Capitol on a stretcher to cast a vote to get it out of committee. In 1952, with $9 million, construction started. The doors opened in 1955. Fast forward 70 years, and here we are. So our foundation, the foundation of everything you're about to hear, was built on a country boy from Taylorsville, a female legislator from the Mississippi Delta in the 1950s, and one vote. I had wanted to make the point to our students who aren't here today, don't ever think one vote won't matter. Here we are. So we're the only academic medical center in the state. That means we have an education mission, we have a research mission, and we have a patient care clinical mission. Those are distinct and they are very important. But what I want to say is, to the observer, they are woven together so tightly that you really can't tease them out. So let me give you an example of that. If we were to go today and walk into this morning our pediatric cancer clinic, you would see patients there and families, and you would think, well, this is patient care, this is the clinical mission, and you would be right. If you look around the room, you would also see people with short white coats on, patches from a variety of schools, School of Nursing, School of Pharmacy, School of lots of things. And you would think, okay, education is happening here as well. And it is. You could also learn that a number of the patients being seen today in the pediatric cancer clinic have qualified to be on clinical trials. So research is happening there as well. In everything we do, these three missions are woven together to make up the fabric of the medical center. Big picture numbers. More than 12,000 people work at the medical center. We are very proud that we've been on the list for 5 years in a row of the best employers in the state by Forbes. Our people make us who we are. It's the most critical part. We have over a $2 billion operating revenue. We have hospitals in 4 locations, Grenada, Lexington, Madison, and Jackson. On our Jackson campus, we have 6 medical towers, 2 for pediatrics, Batson and Sanderson, 2 adult towers, the Weiser Tower, which is women and infants, and then a critical care tower that houses all of the adult critical care beds and our bone marrow transplant unit. We have over 1,000 licensed beds, with 288, almost a third of those being critical care beds. That's a lot of critical care beds. 6 health science schools, 139 active funded research programs, 235 active clinical trials. And in this last bullet, you can see that not only for the city of Jackson and the metro area, but for the state, we are a huge economic driver. From this map, the point I really want you to take away is just that we have a statewide presence. The different colors on this map show our telehealth locations, our clinic locations, our hospitals, our affiliated hospitals, the locations that our students go for training, our helicopter sites. We truly have a statewide presence. Jackson is our home base, sort of the mothership, but we extend our reach in lots of different ways all across the state of Mississippi. One of the things that perhaps the people around this table are especially interested in is, what about the money? Where does the money come from? So this shows our sources of revenue for over the last decade or so. And you can see the bottom line, the light blue line, that's our state appropriations. That equals about 8 or 9% of our total revenue. We have tuition dollars. We bring in external funds for research. We are raising private funds, all the things. But the most notable part of this graph is the big green stripe. That is patient care revenues from all sources. That is clearly the gas that runs the engine. Most Monday mornings, I meet with new employees at new employee orientation, and I give them a welcome from leadership. One of the things that I make sure to say, usually more than once, is every person at the medical center should feel highly invested in the highest possible patient outcomes and a superb patient experience, because that's the gas that runs the engine. If you get that part right, the ratings, the rankings, the reputation, the reimbursement, all of that follows. And sometimes we'll have people in employee orientation who say, well, I'm on the finance team, or I'm going to be on the police force, or whatever. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not the surgeon taking the patient to the OR. How will I have a part of the patient experience and patient outcomes? And what I tell them is, You will cross paths with patients and their families. You may be going to lunch in the cafeteria. You may be getting on an elevator and somebody's getting off that elevator. Assume everybody is having a bad day, that they've gotten some news that they don't want to hear. Assume everybody could use a smile, could use a, "Are you lost? Can I help you?" Make that assumption every time. Everybody can be part of the patient experience because that drives our engine. It's critically important. I want to speak just a little bit, particularly about I thought we put this together specifically for this audience because I thought all of our presidents and chancellor would be very interested in seeing where our students come from. So this shows that 60% of our student body comes from your institutions. And I want to thank you for that. Thank you for sending us these fantastic students. We appreciate it. About 40% come from other non-IHL institutions. And you see this student number, 2518. That is our student number. You may hear me at times mention that we have around 3,200 or a little over 3,200 learners. And we do because that number includes the residents. Our number as of last week of residents is 725. So if you add that to the 2,500, that gives you the idea of the learners in our clinical environment. The other thing that I want to point out is at any given time at the medical center, you would see lots of students with patches on or badges that are ours. But you would also see students with patches that are not ours. On an average year, we take between 1,000 and 1,500 students from other schools to provide part of their clinical training. Lots of nursing schools, medical students from all over the country, CRNA students from Southern. It's a whole variety of other students that come into our clinical environment for 2 weeks or 6 months, whatever it might be, to receive part of their training. Now, I drill this down just a little bit more for you for the medical school. So in this case, 65% of our medical students come from our IHL sister organizations, with 35% coming from other organizations. This is an enrollment trend since 2019, and our schools are growing. Programs within the schools are growing. New programs are coming online. All of our schools and all of our missions actually are in a growth phase. But this I thought was particularly impactful because it highlights what I think we have seen since and maybe because of the pandemic, and that is a new appreciation of the need for the healthcare workforce. Now, we track a number of outcomes for all of our schools. This slide highlights just the medical school. So we, of course, track our outcomes against those national outcomes. And at the national level for medical school, they typically look at a 5-year graduation rate. And you can see in this most recent report, we match that graduation rate. Sometimes our 5-year graduation rate is 96%. Sometimes the national level is 94, 93. My point is we work very hard to be sure that we at least meet that national graduation rate, if not exceed it. That's very important for us. And then also important is retention. Remember 1950 and Blaine Eaton who said, we've got to keep our people in our state? So Mississippi ranks 6th in the nation in retaining our graduates to practice in our state. This is the medical school retention numbers. As long as I've been tracking this, which has been about the last 25 years or so, we have always been in the top 10. So we do very well in retaining our graduates to practice in our state. In a couple of our schools, medical school and dental school specifically, we only take in-state residents. So we stack the deck a little bit. but that's okay. That's what we're here for. In research, a couple of the takeaways that I really want you to gather from this is we have about 150 research faculty. All of our research programs are focused on the diseases that are most impactful in a bad way to us, to all of us, to our families, to Mississippians. And you can see that several of these are long-standing large population studies. These are competitively bid for. They are important studies. They are important national studies. This isn't the whole scope of our research portfolio, but these are some of the larger projects and these are some of the most long-standing projects. And again, they are focused on the diseases that are most harmful to Mississippians. At the end, I'm going to say a few specific things about cancer. A few fast facts. Last year, the year that ended June 30, 2025, our research mission brought in a little over $100 million in external funds for research, mainly NIH dollars, but also Department of Defense and others. That was actually a bit of a low year for us. I anticipate that this year we will end higher than that number. You can see the number of publications, the number of submissions. And again, this is from a faculty group that is about 150 in number. So they are very busy. They are very productive. Just like on the clinical side and on the education side, we hold them to certain accountability measures, certain amount of funding per person, per department. We track publications and all of the outcome measures as well. And our research mission does very well. I want to hit on a few things in the patient care arena. So this slide is just to sort of demonstrate, as an academic medical center and the only academic medical center in the state, depending on the day, we might have on totally different hats. So these are sort of all of our personality components. We're a state agency. We're a primary care source. We offer multi-specialty care, tertiary care. We're a safety net hospital. We are doing research. We are an educator. We're a university campus. Sometimes all of those different roles that we have are in conflict with each other. So, that creates a scenario where it's never a dull day at work. And there's a constant tension about resources. And when I say resources, I mean people, time, and money. And at the end of the day, those are the things that we constantly have to balance in our strategic priorities. Where do we put our focus, our time, our people, our money with all these competing priorities? One of the things that we are proud of as the state's only medical center is the fact that we offer services and programs that are not found anywhere else in the state. And many times the deciding factor of whether to do this or do that really boils down to this kind of question. If we don't do it, will Mississippians have to leave the state for this level of care? So again, this is not a comprehensive list, but it gives you some of the bullet points of the programs that we offer, the services that we offer, where we're the only ones in the state that have this capability and these services. The only dedicated children's hospital, the only place doing transplants, the only level 4 neonatal ICU. We take care of the sickest babies in Mississippi. And by metrics that you can use to compare acuity level and how sick a patient is across hospitals and across states, we take care of some of the sickest babies in the country. The only level 1 trauma center, the only burn center accredited for adults and pediatrics. We are one of only 2 in the country, National Center of Excellence for Telehealth. We play an official role through the governor's office and the Department of Health in statewide disaster response. We have a designation of ESF 8, and that just means we're the medical arm of a disaster response. We have the Mississippi Center for Emergency Services, the only one in the country, and the only pediatric skilled nursing facility. Again, this isn't a comprehensive list, but it gives you an idea. This is sort of by the numbers for our number of patients that we see, and I'm not going to read all these numbers. The points I want to make are, number one, it's a lot, over 1 million in our clinics alone. And we take care of patients from all 82 counties. So in every county in Mississippi, we take care of patients from every county. Again, we do truly have a statewide reach. So these last few slides I have are about cancer because that is our top strategic priority right now. And we've been working on this and planning around this and doing some of the groundwork for a couple of years. That is a conversation is about to become more public. So if you haven't heard about it yet, starting around the 1st of April, you will start hearing about it and we'll start seeing about this. These are the 4 points I want you to hear me say about cancer. Number one, in Mississippi, we have a problem. Number two, in Mississippi, we do not have the best solution to the problem. Number three, the University of Mississippi Medical Center is the only entity in the state that can achieve that best solution. And number four, we're doing it. So let me give you a little detail on that. We have a problem. Our cancer outcomes in this state are the worst in the country. So that's a fact. And it's for lots and lots of reasons, but we have the worst cancer outcomes in the country. If you peel that back a little bit and look at specific groups and specific parts of the state, as you might imagine on this map, red is bad. Black males in the Mississippi Delta have cancer outcomes that are equal to some of the worst in the world, not just the country, but the world. So we have a problem. What we know is patients who are treated at that top tier kind of cancer center overall have survival rates that are improved by 25%. That top tier kind of cancer center is something called NCI designation, National Cancer Institute designation. Mississippi doesn't have one of those. Louisiana doesn't have one of those. Arkansas does not have one of those. When people in Mississippi leave the state to see a specialist that we don't have, to see if they can get in a clinical trial that they can't get into here, they go to MD Anderson. We burned the road up to Houston, Texas, I'll tell you that. To Birmingham, to Vanderbilt. Those are NCI designated cancer centers. That's a club that we're not in. And what those kind of cancer centers offer would be experts, access to clinical trials, and other patient resources that you don't have if you're not one of those. So we have a problem and we don't have the best solution for that problem in Mississippi. This again kind of shows the map, and we're in a 3-state area with no NCI designated cancer center. The University of Mississippi Medical Center is the only entity that can make this application, that can achieve this goal, because the core part of the application is a certain amount of horsepower in cancer research. For these last now 3 years, we have been pushing hard in recruiting cancer researchers and building out that team, and we've made great progress. Our cancer center director is not in the room, but even when he's in the room, I'm happy to say he's going faster than I thought he could. We've still got work to do. We're not there, but we're pushing hard and we're going in that direction. Again, it is that decision that if we don't do it, it just won't happen in Mississippi. So hopefully, maybe 10 years from now, whoever the vice chancellor is can stand up here and tell you all how our cancer outcomes have improved. But it's something that we feel like we have to do, an ethical imperative. So we're building that out. Part of this effort then is also to build a cancer center, a facility to house all of this activity. That's a 250, maybe $300 million project. We are raising money. We're raising half the money, $125 million. We've got a campaign that's been going on that has been in the quiet phase for a little over a year now, for some 14, 15 months, even though I talk about it every time I get in front of a group of people. I haven't been quiet at all. But one of our great problems is keeping this slide up to date. This slide says we have raised 90 million of that 125, and actually the current number is 100. So we are at $100 million of that 125 that we're raising. We're also seeking support from the state and then support from the feds as well to bring this together. And all of this work is happening in parallel, recruiting the researchers, building out the research teams, continuing to build out the clinical teams, the medical oncologist, the surgical oncologist, the radiation oncologist, and then as well the work toward this facility to house all of this as it comes together. And again, it kind of comes back to that, where I started, the all for your health. The health of Mississippians and the responsibilities that we feel as the state's only academic medical center is what drives this mission and what drives this work. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit.
Thank you, Dr. Woodward. We certainly appreciate the medical center. I know many of you probably have been patients there or certainly had friends and family there, and I've had great experiences there and very grateful to them for all they do. We're now going to move to NCHM's presentation. So Dr. Pierce, if you would introduce our next presenters, please.
Thank you. Good morning. You have this morning Dr. Sarah Pingle from the National Center for Higher Education Management Systems, who presented last month and the month prior and presented some options for you to consider and get feedback. And they've gotten that feedback now. And they want to give you what they've done with that and thoughts about moving forward. So Dr. Pingle.
Thank you, Dr. Pierce and Trustee Ogletree, and good morning to everyone in the room. Glad to be with you again today to share our progress on the funding model project that NCHMS is pleased to partner with the IHL on. As Dr. Pierce said today, I'm really glad to share some of that progress with everyone today. That includes looking at the feedback that we've received from all of the institutions and various stakeholders that we engaged with around the draft models that were presented last month. At that point, I'll pivot the presentation to talk more about post-graduation outcomes data that we've received from the state longitudinal data system. And just give a quick advanced peek into how we're thinking about using that data as just a check-in point along the way. So with that, you all know NCHMS well at this point. We'll talk about the model objectives, feedback, and then the outcomes data in our next steps. So model objectives and the stakeholder feedback. So as a reminder, this is a slide that folks in this room have seen before. We were under contract to start this project in October of 2025. In December and January, we spoke with a host of stakeholders in this process, from folks, presidents, and institutional leaders at all 8 of the institutions, to the trustees, legislators, and folks from Accelerate Mississippi. And we pulled those findings together into an objective statement for this work. And this is the statement that we've been using to guide our progress and to guide the direction of the model that we're working to develop. We've looked at this statement a few different times, but just wanted to share this at the top as kind of the guiding star for the work that we've been undertaking, noting that the goal of this work is really to establish a data-driven allocation formula that adequately supports the core institutional operations and student success at all 8 of the institutions. We know that this model will include a performance component. You'll hear me say a few times in this presentation, everybody has told us that they really would like to see a significant focus on performance. So we know that performance will be there, and we know that performance will focus on improvement in student progression, improvement in completion metrics. And this isn't just because that feels like a good idea. It's because the state needs this to work. They need more completion. The state needs more educational attainment and more folks entering into the workforce. So that's why this piece of the statement is really there. We also heard from stakeholders that they want to see recognition of differences in institutional missions, student populations, and cost structures, and that we would like to design a model that is really robust and designed to accommodate enrollment fluctuations and appropriation changes. So I'll continue to come back to this statement as one that that is developed based on what we've heard from stakeholders and based on NCHEMS's expertise in the field, and has really formed a guidepost for us as we move through this process. Using that statement, we used the data that we received from IHL and others to create some updates to the legacy framework that was created in 2012. And then off of that, we also developed 4 different draft models that work off of this base cost performance model that we looked at last month in this meeting. And the feedback that I'm about to share is what we've rolled up from talking to all of the stakeholders that we have reached out to or that have reached out to us based on those draft models. So we shared those draft models in this meeting. We also shared those draft models in person at all 8 of the institutions. Throughout the month of February, we met with the presidents, with their cabinets, finance teams, the institutional research teams. We met with students, and we talked last month too about some of our findings from those focus groups. And we also met with any additional stakeholders that may have been specified by those campus leaders. So whether that was alumni or employers, other folks that were just contextually important to that campus. And that's what we're pulling together today with the feedback from other stakeholders to share back with everyone. We had hours of meetings, and I'm probably pushing 50 pages of notes from all of those meetings, and we've tried to pull that together into some key themes that we'd like to share back with everyone. You may see things in here that you shared. You may feel like things that you shared in here might not be coming out loud enough. Both of those things could be true, but we're doing our best to kind of roll up where do we see kind of a critical mass of feedback? Where do we see the potential for consensus to form around a proposed solution? That's really what we're looking for here. So the first theme is we heard a lot of folks with concerns around the student populations that are served by each of the institutions and the differences in mission for each of the institutions. We've also received questions about what do we mean when we say institutional mission, and so we can talk more about that as well. We received concerns around institutional size and context, knowing that the state doesn't need 8 flagship universities, and it also doesn't need 8 small regional universities, right? They need a diverse set of institutions of 8 different types of institutions that can meet student needs. And so we received concerns about how responsive the model is to institutional size and context. We heard a lot of concerns about how, particularly, I think it was draft number 2, treated resident and non-resident students. So we'll talk more about that. And then we also received feedback around the performance metrics. So I'll go through each of these themes in more detail, and then I'll talk about the decisions that we've made resulting from this feedback. How did that feedback inform what we're going to do next? So for student population and mission differences, we heard really consistently across all of the institutions that all students need different types of supports in order to be successful. Whether those students are maybe the first in their family to attend college, whether they're eligible for Pell Grants as an indication of coming from a lower socioeconomic background, whether they're coming back to college later in life, whether they are from an under-resourced community or graduated from an under-resourced school district and have different levels of preparation, or whether they're transferring from another institution and getting used to a new campus environment. All of these different student populations and others that are likely not listed here need unique and different supports to be successful. Providing those unique and different supports is not a cost-neutral proposition for each of the institutions, and they would like to see recognition of those efforts to expend resources to support these different students. We also heard about measurement of post-graduation metrics, so things like employment and salaries. There's a desire for those to be sensitive to where students started and to the varied paths that they may take through their education. Meaning they may attend courses part-time, they may attend full-time, they may stop out and come back, but that measuring any of these metrics should be responsive and make sure that institutions are rewarded for that progress and those employment and salary outcomes, whether it's a first-time full-time student who achieves those outcomes or a different type of student as well. So that's the first theme of feedback that we heard. The second theme is we heard a lot of feedback and concerns around institutional size and context. So as I said earlier, there are smaller institutions within the system, and then there are also, major regional flagships within the system. And so smaller and regional institutions are structured inherently differently than larger institutions, and this impacts their costs. We also heard at each of the institutions really unique expenses that they face that not all of the other institutions would necessarily face. Some of the institutions reported unusually high faculty and staff recruitment costs, things like having to pay for basic municipal services like internet access, water, gas, electric by virtue of their remote location. Other institutions shared about just because they're, again, located perhaps, on the Gulf Coast, and they have a different set of insurance requirements that are there for them, that they don't have clear ways to receive support for those types of expenses. And then at other campuses still, this aging infrastructure and historically protected buildings where they feel a little bit hamstrung over wanting to maintain certainly state resources and ensure that facilities are safe for students, but they need to do so in certain ways as they have historically protected buildings that are there. There's also concern about enrollment incentives present within any of the funding model. I think, all of the institutions are eager to serve students well, and they're eager to serve as many students that would come through their doors as are qualified and prepared to attend. And they're concerned about the enrollment incentives that would be present, whether those students would be coming from inside of Mississippi, from other states, what kinds of programs those students want, all of that. So that kind of falls into this institutional size and context bucket of feedback. Building on that, we call out a specific theme around the treatment of resident and non-resident students. So draft number 2, in particular, allocated base and cost funding to Mississippi resident students only, and excluded non-resident students from the calculation of institutions' allocations. And in this draft in particular, larger institutions were very concerned that a resident-weighted model would penalize necessary and productive out-of-state student recruitment, right? That out-of-state student recruitment not only brings in, tuition revenue to each of the institutions, but economic health to the regions where they're located. Could be something that combats brain drain, that brings people into the state of Mississippi. And so they were concerned about losing support for those types of activities through the model. Smaller and regional institutions were concerned about the fragility of the in-state student market, knowing that I'm going to forget which campus, but someone shared with us at one of the campus, well, none of the 8 institutions can survive on in-state students alone. And that's very true, right? And so if we have incentives present within the model that really incentivize the enrollment of in-state students, we worry about turning the heat up on potential competition there. Enrollment management, so the activities that institutions undertake to align admissions and financial aid, policies behind their student recruitment efforts, that has largely been in the purview of the institutions. And that's the case in most states, right? That enrollment management is really within the institutions to decide and to develop strategies around. But we can't neglect that the funding model will present some incentives to those activities that could impact their approach, and we just want to be mindful of the downstream consequences of those incentives. The fourth and final theme for feedback was really around the performance metrics. Everybody wants to see performance in this model, and everybody wants to see really responsive and meaningful performance criteria that have the potential to support behavior changes in the campuses, right? But we need to do that in a sensitive and appropriate way, right? So we need sensitivity to low earning but high importance fields like public service, education, social work. These are fields where earnings are not expected to be particularly high, but they are expected to exceed those of what a high school graduate would earn. And the state of Mississippi needs people working in these fields, right? We need people working in kindergarten classrooms in the Delta, and we need people working in social work fields in Oxford. These are things that the state of Mississippi needs. There's concern in the performance metric that using a graduation rate does not measure success for all students at any of the institutions, in fact. So graduation rates, as they're traditionally measured, focus on cohorts of students that enter college as first-time full-time freshmen. At some of the institutions, first-time full-time freshmen represent a majority of the students that they enroll. And at other institutions, first-time full-time freshmen make up less than a quarter of the students that they enroll. That doesn't mean that the other 75% of that institution's enrollment shouldn't be counted in terms of their progress and success. And it doesn't mean that the institution shouldn't still be held accountable to ensuring the success of people that come to their institution for an education who aren't first-time full-time freshmen. So there was concern about limitations in measuring graduation rates and wanting to make sure that transfer students and all types of students are counted when they complete their credentials. There were also some measures that were in the performance metrics that to some folks felt more tightly linked to performance than others. So we heard that a lot of folks felt that attainment and completion of credentials, progression through to 30 credit hours, 60 credit hours in graduation made a lot of sense. Looking at productivity metrics like credentials that are awarded made a lot of sense, but we heard less agreement around characteristics such as research as a performance component. We haven't made decisions around how we're going to deal with that yet, but we did hear some concerns not only about how we measured research activity at each of the institutions, but also whether or not research activity was an appropriate performance component for all 8 of the institutions. And then finally, and this is a perennial concern in any performance-driven model, whether we're working in Mississippi or Tennessee or Kentucky, there is a lag in performance in measurement present within the drafts. So performance that is attained a year ago wouldn't be rewarded until maybe 1 or even 2 years into the future, depending on how we work to set up the data reporting behind the model. And I think in an ideal world, we would like to see those performance rewards granted in a more timely fashion in alignment with when that performance occurs. So folks were concerned about the lag in measurement too. Before I pivot to some of the decisions, Trustee Ogletree, it's a little bit difficult for me just because I can't see the room. Do you feel it would be appropriate to pause for any questions or clarifications at this point? Or do folks feel like?
It'd probably be best for you to complete this, and then we'll have questions from the trustees that if there are any at this point. And since we're doing this, some of us may have questions after we think through it and need to get back with you a little later.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. All right. So what are we doing with all of this feedback that we heard? Well, how can we use this information to inform our next steps? So I'm going to present our resulting decisions in 3 different buckets. This first bucket is things that we're going to keep doing or things that we've heard that folks are really on the same page about. The second bucket are things that we're going to stop doing. We've heard feedback. We don't think it's going to work. We don't think it's applicable. And so we're going to abandon some ideas. And then the third bucket are things that we still need to figure out, right? Like we know there's not a clear consensus and we need to decide what the next steps are going to be. So within this first bucket of decisions, we're going to continue incentivizing success for Pell recipients and adult learners in the draft. We heard from many people that we spoke with, and we believe based on our experience and based on other states' practices, that focusing on covering more of the costs for institutions to serve these student populations well is a key priority. So we're going to keep working in that direction. We're going to keep working to ensure that transfer students are really included effectively within this model. And that means things like how we measure completion and how we measure progression within the model, because we want to be inclusive of those students who have maybe begun their educational journey at a different institution and are coming to an IHL institution to complete their bachelor's degree. So we're going to keep working in that direction. There are places in the model that already have some pretty clear connections to campus community context. We're going to work to make sure that those are elevated and understood. We're not quite sure just yet if they need to be expanded, but we're going to make sure that those are easier for people to see within the model. So what are the things within the model that make the funding allocation approach responsive to institutional mission? We're going to continue to work to make sure those components are there and well understood. Again, elevating unique mission-aligned costs and needs. So there are institutions that shared with us, that they have very unique costs, whether that's insurance costs or building maintenance costs. The current draft models did not have a way to integrate that, and so we're going to work to see what we can do to make more of those components present in the model. We really want to make sure that time to degree metrics are there. So the first initial drafts did have completion measures contained within it, but it didn't have any completion measures that were tied to time. And limitations with that notwithstanding, with the limitation on first-time, full-time freshmen, people still want to see a time to degree metric involved within the model. So we're going to work to integrate that. And we're also going to work to integrate the post-graduation outcomes data, and we'll look more at that in the second half of the presentation. So before I went to Hattiesburg on February, I think it was February the 2nd, it was January 31st that we received the data from NSPARC, and they worked incredibly quickly to get that to us on a very tight time frame. But in those intervening, Saturday and Sunday, we didn't have time to go in and revise all of the drafts that we were about to share with all the institutions. So we've started that work, and so we'll look at that in this next part of the presentation. So those are the things that we're going to keep doing. Things that we're going to stop doing. So we are really limited in measurement of first generation students. I think at all 8 institutions, folks mentioned that they would really like to see service to and success for students who are first in their family to attend college incentivized. We don't have a way to measure it. So the 8 institutions don't measure first generation student status consistently. And to my knowledge, they don't roll that up to the IHL level in any consistent way. So that limits the way that we could use it as a measurement, especially on the time frame with which we're working in this project. I think we could easily recommend that be an area that the IHL explore further, but it's not an area that we're going to be able to build into the model in this round, at least as we can see at this point in time. We're also not going to carry over external assessments of institutional performance. And by that, I mean, we heard feedback from folks that institutions had received awards or designations. So for example, 7 of the 8 institutions have a Carnegie designation for access and affordability. This is laudable, and this is really something to celebrate. We worry, and we would not recommend, whether in Mississippi's context or in any other context, that direct linkages to externally completed assessments of performance exist within the model. And that's just because it's an area of vulnerability moving forward, right? Like you all as trustees with decision-making authority here wouldn't know everything about what went into determining those external assessments. We don't know how often they're going to be updated by those external organizations. We don't know if they'll change their methods for that. And it just opens up kind of a technical risk to the model, and another thing for the IHL staff to need to keep track of in terms of making sure that everything is updated each year. And so we will not be moving forward with carrying over any of those external assessments of performance into the IHL model. Finally, we heard, and it was the third theme of feedback, a lot of feedback about how the model treats resident versus non-resident students. We are not going to move forward with considering student residency status in the calculation of base or cost portions of the model. I think we heard that the potential downstream consequences of including that in the model were probably larger than we would want to impose within this state. And so we're going to abandon our consideration of student residency status as we presented in draft 2 last month. Finally, there's a set of things that we're really not sure about that we need to continue to do further research on and continue to work on. The first is how to handle research as a performance component. So I shared earlier in the performance metrics feedback that we received, we did not hear clear consensus about whether or not an institution's research activity is appropriately considered as a performance component. It may be a component that exists that impacts their costs, or that maybe should impact their base expenses, but as a performance component, we didn't hear clear consensus about that. Some states do include research as a performance component. There are many states that don't as well. And so we need to do further work together to figure out what that's going to look like, how, if we're going to include it, how it would be measured, and if we're going to include it, where in the model it should most appropriately sit. We have more work to do as well on ensuring that post-graduation outcomes are accurate and comprehensive based on data availability. There's a set of 4 or 5 slides after this that talk in way more detail about this, because this is the current well that we're all mired in here at NCHEMS right now. So we have a lot of questions still about moving forward in that area. Perhaps one of the most difficult pieces about working on an allocation model is that we heard a lot of feedback that people want to add more components to the model. So they would like to see things like their unique costs included. They would like to see things like maintenance of their facilities included. But adding more desired components to the model still needs to fit within funding availability, right? This is an allocation model. It's not a calculation of what the state should allocate. It's a way to divide what the state has already allocated. And so we can, just to be perhaps overly direct about it, right? We could make every stakeholder happy by adding in every component that they would like to see within the model. But doing that wouldn't actually fundamentally change the fact that we have to allocate the funding. It wouldn't add any money to what we're able to provide. And so we need to be cautious and careful about how we think about that moving forward. And so that's another piece that we're continuing to grapple with as a team. And then finally, we're continuing to grapple with this idea of creating linkages between tuition and appropriations policies. So in draft, I think it was draft 3 that we looked at last month and that we looked at in February with the institutions. There was a draft that looked at how institutions achieve a balance in their unrestricted revenues that they receive from tuition and from the state. Historically, this has not been an area where the state of Mississippi has built policy linkages. There are other states that do build more direct linkages here in order to allocate limited resources to where they may be the most effective and helpful at each of the institutions, knowing that each of the institutions has a different and differing capacity to generate tuition. And so some examples of those states are shared on this slide. Some of these are good analogs to Mississippi. Some of these states aren't perfect analogs to Mississippi. But just by way of example, so in the state of Minnesota, the state seeks to provide 2/3 of each institution's total revenue, including state student financial aid, with 1/3 of the institution's revenue coming from tuition. In Tennessee, these cost sharing targets are disaggregated by sector. So for public 4-year institutions, which would be most applicable to the institutions we're talking about here, the state seeks to provide 55% of the institution's unrestricted revenue, with 45% coming from student tuition. And then those percentages increase for the state as Tennessee moves into the community college and applied technology sectors. In Virginia, 66% provided by the state, with 33% provided from student tuition. And then in Wyoming, they shoot for the student share to fall between 23 to 38% of the system-wide unrestricted revenue. So when they look at all the institutions together, they would like for the student tuition to be 23 to 38%, with the remaining portions coming from other sources such as the state. So this is not a new idea in higher education funding or finance. It's not one that every state does, certainly. But it is one, especially in states with limited funding for their higher education systems to target resources. So it's one strategy that could be considered. So that concludes the portion of the presentation focused on feedback and what we're doing next with that feedback. We are working again at breakneck speed to get this completed as quickly as possible. And if I didn't say it before, I was remiss in not stating at the outset that we're really grateful for everyone's engagement on the draft models. I know some people had a favorite, some people didn't like any of them at all, but they were really effective in getting the discussion started about how we can best move forward. And so everyone's openness and willingness to engage on them has been tremendously helpful for us in moving forward. So we're very appreciative of that. And with that, I would like to pivot to talking more about the post-graduation outcomes data that we've received, knowing that folks were concerned about this showing up in the performance metrics, and folks wanted to see more about how we would work with the data that we received from the state longitudinal data system. So what data did we receive from NSPARC? NSPARC is the state's longitudinal data system, which is housed at Mississippi State University. Unlike many states, Mississippi has an unusually strong state longitudinal data system because it tracks individuals from high school through post-secondary ed through the workforce. Not every state system is able to do that. So that's a real asset to us in considering how we can use this data in this work. What we received is listed on the left-hand column of this slide. We received median earnings for folks. We received the number of graduates employed in Mississippi, the percentage of graduates employed in Mississippi, and we also received median earnings data for people that finished high school but never attended college so that we could create some comparison benchmarks. Each of those 4 data points were reported at 1, 3, and 5 years post-graduation. Well, I guess the first one was reported at 1, 3, and 5 years post-graduation. We received 10 years of historical data for most of the data elements that we requested. We also received that information disaggregated by degree level and discipline clusters. So we have, for example, STEM majors together in one place versus folks that may have degrees in the humanities or in other fields, right? And NSPARC gave us all of these earnings adjusted for inflation, which was a big help to our team as well. We don't have it at NCHEMS, the student level data that connects all of this. We received the aggregated information from NSPARC, and they've been really helpful partners to us throughout this process. There are some real limitations, however, to the data that we've received, and this is not the fault of NSPARC, it's just the way that the data are set up. So what we've received excludes earnings for graduates that are working outside of the state of Mississippi. So we only have earnings data from people that are receiving paychecks here in Mississippi after they've completed their credential. We don't have information about people who are employed by the federal government. So most notably, this would be people who are in the military. Their earnings are not included within this data set as well, whether or not they live in Mississippi. We don't have information about, folks that have left the state to go to graduate school. So they normally, if they were going to graduate school in Mississippi, we would count that as a positive post-graduation outcome. But if they went to graduate school in another state, we would lose them at that point in this data. The median earnings data reflect all graduates, not just people who were enrolled full-time. So we have the earnings information for people, whether they're working 20 hours a week or 40 hours a week or 10 hours a week. And you can see how that would impact where the median of those earnings sit if people that are working different numbers of hours are all included together. So that's a real limitation of the data that we have. The earnings data are only collected annually, only once a year, but people's earnings can change multiple times throughout the year. And so they're collected once throughout the year, and then there's a process where they infer what it would be for the full year if that person had those earnings. So that's also kind of an imperfect limitation to how this is being measured. We also have some concerns about the amount of suppressed data here. So I shared that we have, earnings and employment data for discipline level outcomes. So whether the person was a graduate of a STEM program or humanities program or whatever, what have you. When those programs are small, at small institutions, then we don't receive any data at all. And so that's a concern for us as well as we think about using these data. So what we have is not nothing, right? We have a lot of data about earnings and whether or not folks are employed in the state, but we don't have a full picture of post-graduation outcomes for all students that are leaving IHL institutions. That being said, we have started to play with this a little bit. And so what we did here is show using the same methodology as the federal gainful employment rules, do all people in the IHL institutions, even with these limitations, see a return on their degree? And so on the left-hand column, what you see are the earnings 1 year after college by institution. This is for all fields together. And then on the right side, what a comparable high school benchmark would have looked like for someone 6 years after their high school completion at the same time. And all of the IHL institutions meet that gainful employment requirement at the institutional level. And so the other issue that we're grappling with the wage data is, a performance metric in order for it to change what institutions do, right? you could consider that it should have some variability within it, right? But really, all of the institutions are meeting that federally defined gainful employment outcome at this time. And so using the earnings in that same way wouldn't introduce variation into the model. So this is another kind of piece that we're grappling with here. And it's at the same time should be celebrated that all 8 of the institutions are providing a return for students that's above what they would have realized if they were only a high school completer. And this is folks that are staying and living and working in the state of Mississippi. So just as an early glimpse of kind of how we're working with this data so far. We have a lot of next steps to pursue in this area, right? So that was some earnings data. We still need to work with number and percent of graduates that are working in Mississippi. That data is ready to be modeled. We're still working on that at this time. We also need to have more conversations with NSPARC about the potential to capture out-of-state employment and earnings data. We also want to capture people who are enrolled in graduate school out of state. It would make these measures so much more comprehensive if we were able to have those things included. And we need to determine some next steps for the wage data as well. So we need to understand better how we can use and leverage that within the model. So a lot of next steps still to pursue. But just want to express our gratitude to the folks at NSPARC for churning out what they did churn out for us so quickly. And more work left to be done as well. So with that, if I'll pass it to Trustee Ogletree, if there would be any questions that he would like to entertain from the trustees, and you all have my contact information, and I'll continue to share that with folks as they have questions and would like to reach out.
Thank you, Dr. Pingle, and we appreciate the work you and Scott are doing on this. I think we have and the complexity here and how appreciate all the feedback that we've been receiving. I would ask if you would just the slides, and I know we have, y'all can just distribute them internally. That would be helpful. It may be that we have more questions just to review them, but does anyone have a board now that you would like to ask Dr. Pink, or we can continue the written data?
Chairman, I have just one question. Dr. Pringle, it is somewhat overwhelming and will this end result be something easily understandable and follow, that they can seek to acquire the metric included in the ultimate formula? In other words, how can this be and changed on a year-to-year basis by metrics that do seem very overwhelming?
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't hear all of the question. What I heard was around the complexity of the model and how we can work to make it more understandable. Is that correct?
Yes. Will it be understandable in the end, and can it be measured on a year-to-year basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the trustees have had either the privilege of the curse of being around at every stage of this process with us. And we've shared a lot of information with all of you along the way. And I definitely appreciate that it's been a real deluge. And that's been a function of how quickly this project has worked as well. We haven't had the time to really sit down and dig in on one component at a time, or to talk about how each individual component interacts with other components. And that's just been an artifact of how quickly we've moved through this process. When we do arrive at a recommendation, it would be our intent for folks to be on the same page with understanding how the model works. And we would look forward to working further with Dr. Pierce, Dr. Rankins, and the trustees themselves to structure those opportunities so that folks can really dig in and make sure that they understand all of the aspects of the recommended model.
Thank you.
And it sounds to me, Dr. Pingle, that as we look at various component portions of it, that could also be evaluated. And then I heard you also that as additional data becomes available, we may want to consider additional data that's not available now. Okay, there are other questions? Well, thank you, Dr. Pingle, and welcome our university IEOs to also make comments to Dr. Pingle and to Dr. Prescott as to what you've heard today. We'll provide you with the same information, if you do that, so that you'll be able to analyze it, realizing we hadn't seen a model yet. So we're understanding data. We've actively with the legislature on this. I have met with and met with others. We're data. Everybody has different perspectives, various institutions, and also, across our state with stakeholders, including some within the legislature. But we're doing our best to come up with a model that will be effective, that we think is responsive to what we have heard from both our institutions and from our legislative leaders. And we appreciate everyone's cooperation with that. So thank you, Dr. Pringle, and if you'd thank Dr. Prescott for us as well.
I will do that. Thank you very much, Trustee Ogletree, and to the rest of the trustees and IHL staff.
Yes, ma'am. The next item that we have are the consent agendas. Are there any items on the consent agendas that need to be moved to the regular agenda for consideration? Okay, if not, is there a motion to approve the consent agendas? It's been a motion. Is there a second? It's been a motion and second. Consent agendas. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nay. The motion passes. Now we'll move to the regular agenda, and the first item is the academic affairs. I'll call on Trustee Hubbard to present the academic affairs regular agenda.
Thank you. Academic Affairs has one item on the regular agenda. Dr. Casey Presswood will present the item for the board's consideration.
Thank you, Trustee Hubbard. This proposal is for a new policy to require financial literacy reporting from each of the institutions on this. The concepts of financial literacy are covered in several ways at each of the IHL institutions, including in first-year experience courses, workshops, seminars, co-curricular learning objectives fostered within specific programs, curriculum-based concepts covered in courses, student organization programming, financial coaching for wise use of financial aid, online content made available to students, counseling, and collaborations with external financial institutions. This new policy will require the universities to submit annual reports, updating the board on their continued efforts to provide financial literacy education to undergraduate students. So this is the policy. I'll read it for you. Financial literacy emphasizes practical knowledge and skills relevant to students' unique financial challenges, such as managing limited income, student loans, credit, and long-term planning. Each IHL institution shall ensure that financial literacy concepts are meaningfully covered and accessible to all undergraduate students. Institutions have the flexibility to tailor approaches to their degree programs, campus culture, resources, and student needs, provided the coverage is practical, evidence-informed, and reaches a broad student population. Annually, each institution shall submit a report outlining its financial literacy efforts. Board staff recommends final approval of proposed new policy and waiver of second reading.
You have heard the recommendation and make a motion to approve this item.
There's been a motion to approve item number 1. Is there a second? There's been a motion and a second to approve item number 1. Is there any discussion? I would like to explain to y'all a little bit of the background of this. We've been looking at this for many months. In fact, I had about it probably over a year ago. Our provost, or you gotta help me with the acronym.
CAOs.
CAOs have been meeting and discussing what has been done at every university, and they've shared information, and I think they've learned from each other and are continuing to do that. And Dr. Wilkins, I appreciate your work with them. You were helping to collect some of that data. Appreciate all the universities providing that for us. And we determined that not only are our students doing this in high school that are coming from Mississippi as a requirement, but they have many different and varied opportunities at our universities. I think we will only increase those, and this reporting will help us determine whether we need to continue to do anything different in that regard. I'll tell all of you, I think I've mentioned the trustees, that my initial thought was that we would set a floor. But after talking to the universities, because of the different mission and situation of every university, that really didn't seem practical to me. I know others have different views. I have shared the information that's been provided by each of you to legislative leadership. And because this issue has also been important to many of them. Is there any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? The motion passes.
Thank you. This concludes Academic Affairs regular agenda.
Thank you, Trustee Hubbard, and thank you, Dr. Presswood, for your work on this matter. We're now going to move to the Finance and Budget agenda. Trustee Stevenson, if you'd please present the Finance and Budget regular agenda.
Thank you. We have 4 items on the regular agenda today. They are a purchase agreement from the University of Mississippi Medical Center, a student health insurance policy agreement from the systems office, a request to renew a purchase agreement from Mississippi University for Women, and a request to approve a bond resolution for a revenue bond funding project from the University of Mississippi. I will call on Dr. Pierce to discuss the specifics of these items.
Thank you. Item number 1 is a request from the University of Mississippi Medical Center to enter into a purchase agreement with Medline Industries LP and Vanderbilt Health Purchasing Collaborative LLC for the purchase and distribution of medical and surgical products, hospital consumables, equipment, and other hospital supplies. The term of the agreement is for 5 years and 6 months at an estimated cost of $370 million. UMMC can terminate this agreement with 180 days notice. UMMC conducted a request for proposals in 2025, to which 3 bidders responded. Medline and Vanderbilt were the lowest cost bidders, as well as having the highest capability and service quality scores. Legal staff has reviewed this agreement for compliance with applicable law and finds it to be acceptable, and board staff recommends approval of item number 1.
You have heard the recommendation from board staff. I make a motion to approve item number 1.
There's been a motion to approve item number 1. Is there a second? It's been a motion and second. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? The motion passes. Before we proceed, let the record reflect I'm recusing myself from items 2 through 4 on the Finance and Budget regular agenda, and Trustee Martin will recuse himself from item number 2. We will leave the room, and Vice President Cunningham will lead the discussion in my absence.
Okay, Dr. Pierce, please proceed.
Item number 2 is a request from the system office to enter into an agreement with United Healthcare Student Resources for students to purchase insurance policies directly, or for the institution to purchase policies for certain classes of students to meet coverage requirements for the Affordable Care Act and visa requirements where applicable. The annual cost of the policy for non-UMMC students is $2,790 annually. With an estimated 3,200 participants, the cost is estimated to be $7.8 million over the 1-year term. System office conducted an RFP, and United Healthcare offered the lowest price. Legal staff has reviewed this agreement for compliance with applicable law and finds it to be acceptable, and board staff recommends approval of item number 2.
You have heard the recommendation from board staff. I make a motion to approve item number 2.
There's a motion to approve item number 2. Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Bridget, if you would have Trustee Martin return if you could. All right. Let the record reflect that trustee Ogletree will remain out of the room for the discussion on and vote on item number 3. Dr. Pierce, please proceed.
I think if there's no objection, we can take up items number 3 and 4.
That'd be fine.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Item number 3 is a request from the Mississippi University for Women to enter into a purchase agreement with BNSN Sports LLC to be the exclusive providers for athletic apparels for up to a 3-year term at a cost of $600,000. MEW can terminate after 1 year. MEW conducted an RFP in 2025 and received 3 bids. There were no significant differences found in price, but BSN was found to have more reliable access to stock and supplies and were judged to be the lowest and best bid. Legal staff has reviewed this agreement for compliance with the applicable law and finds it to be acceptable, and board staff recommends approval for item number 3.
You have heard the recommendation from board staff. I make a motion to approve item number 3.
There's a motion to approve item number 3. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Let the record reflect that trustee Ogletree will remain out of the room and trustees Arrington and Clark will now leave the room before the discussion and vote on item number 4. Dr. Pierce, please proceed.
Thank you. Item number 4 is a request from the University of Mississippi for approval of a bond resolution to issue debt not to exceed $338 million, of which $256 million will be for new money projects and up to $82 million will be for the refunding of debt to receive net present value savings. You have at your desk a PowerPoint that will have this information. The refunded series are from 2015 and 2016. Currently at 64 million, and the projects listed here are 256 million. Your policy requires for new money projects that a 2-step approval is needed. The first to receive a financial advisor's report, which we went over last month. For refundings, only 1 approval is needed, provided that the net present value savings are sufficient. For the refunded series, these series total 64 million. The old debt service of all of these together will be 83 million. New debt service will be 81 million for a total savings of 2.3. The net present value of that is 1.6 million for a total net present value savings of 2.6. You'll know that notice there are 2 issues here that are currently not prudent to refund. So if those are excluded, which would be the recommendation if they continue to be not eligible for refunding, this would be a $3.2 million and 3.2% increase. So the approval will be conditioned that all of these at the time of sale would be in the net present value savings of at least 2%. As reviewed last month when we received the financial advisor's report, there was an original slate of projects from 2024 that included most notably a student housing facility. The board has since gone through a process of concluding approval from the University of Mississippi to do a P3 project for that. So that is now taken off, and there's a revised set of projects here, most notable of which is the School of Accountancy, which was not on the previous list, and some additional infrastructure items that were not on the previous list. Project professionals are Butler Snow serving as bond counsel. Financial advisor is Hilltop Security. Raymond James is the underwriter. The financial advisor's report that you reviewed last month showed an annual debt service coverage of 8.3 when including the university foundations. Taking on that debt with no additional revenue from these projects was 7.47 at an interest rate of 4.8%. For the new money project, there will be 263 million with a maximum annual debt service of 17 million and an average of 16 million. So this is a very flat amortization of the new money projects. So when we take the current debt service annually for the university, it is 24.6 million. Adding this $16 million annual debt service, there will be a high at 2030 of $40 million. Within 10 years, we'll get back to where the institution is now in annual debt service, assuming no additional money projects. When we compare this for your financial sustainability policy, the university most recently had about a $103 million surplus before debt service payments compared to the $24 million debt service that the current university had to pay. That works out to about a 4.3 times debt service coverage. You see the lowest year was in 2023 when there was a $60 million cash flow available to pay debt service. That works out to about a 2.5 times debt service. So if we take that as the lowest year and ignore sort of working out the average that's here on the high blue line, we take the black line of the lowest year, the lowest debt service coverage for the university would expect it to be 1.5 times in 2030 at the peak of the debt service payments due. We also looked at the pro forma debt to equity ratio. The university currently has $255 million in debt outstanding compared to $585 million. You'll notice this excludes the PERS pension liability, and Will Crawford from Forbes discussed that issue with the board yesterday. After issue, there will be $520 million, which will still be below the equity of the university. So when we compare this in our financial sustainability metrics, we don't want to see that number get above 1.5. You see here in the light blue, the system trend, which has been trending downward. The university is much lower currently than the rest of the system average. This will put them up close to where the system average was in 2023 and then pay down from there. And so the university has put together the capacity to take on this additional debt. We also looked at the impact of the system debt capacity last month. The board currently has a AA2 rating with positive outlook. The strength of the system is the scale that it's provide. And then I would point out on point 3, bullet number 3 under credit strengths, just a reminder that the board is pledging payment from all legally available sources. So that would be the combined resources of all the universities and the medical center. But they note that the board does this in a carefully managed way and has strong financial oversight, and they factor that into their ratings. Moody's notes that the system has exposure, particularly at UMMC, to changes in Medicaid and Medicare. They note the pension liability and in-state demographics and the competitive student market. And as we saw yesterday in our audit presentation, that is increasing. And what could lead to a downgrade, the second bullet says that could lead to a downgrade if that continues to increase. And so that would be something that's out of the board's control. What is under the board's control is item number 3, which is adding substantial debt without offsetting growth and total wealth and maintaining strong operating performance. So in order to consider the risk of that, we asked the financial advisor to provide an assessment of whether additional known projects that the board may consider in the upcoming year would be debt that goes beyond the capacity that the credit market thinks that we have. And so taking in the new bond issue from the University of Mississippi, the Reed Green Coliseum project, Mississippi State University is looking at a new residential facility and then a portion of the cancer facility if that should be necessary. And we see that we would have a change downward from our composite financial index, but this would be well within our capacity as a AA2 rated entity. But I note that assumes additional projects will provide additional project revenues. So that would be subject to the ongoing due diligence of the board as you review these projects and they come before you and you continue to apply the same conservative approval and oversight that you've done in previous years. So legal staff has reviewed the resolution for approval, and board staff recommends approval of this bond resolution, and this will be the final approval needed to authorize the board to do this issue.
You have heard the recommendation from board staff for item number 4. I'd like to make a motion to approve item number 4.
There's a motion to approve item number 4. Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. The motion passes. Bridget, you could ask trustees Arrington, Clark, and Ogletree to return.
This concludes the finance and budget agenda.
Thank you, trustee Stevenson, and thank you, Dr. Pierce.
Thank you, trustee Cunningham and Dr. Pierce. I will proceed with the informational agendas. Dr. Rankins.
Are any questions regarding items on the information agenda? If not, thank you, President Ogletree.
All right, thank you, Dr. Rankins. The agenda item that needs to be considered at this time. If not, is there any other business for us to discuss? If not, our next scheduled meeting will be April 16th. Look forward to seeing everyone then. We're now going to discuss the need for executive session. Is there a motion to close the meeting to determine the need for an executive session? Been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second to close the meeting to determine the need for executive session. Is there any discussion? Okay, if not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay? The motion passes. Other than IHL trustees and IHL staff, anyone not needed for the executive session should leave the room and disconnect. And visitors are welcome to wait in the hallway. Trustees, give us just a minute to make sure the appropriate participants are connected. Thank you. Thank you.